Pay close attention, because what I'm about to uncover, rooted in Carl Jung's deep insights into the human psyche, has the potential to radically shift how you approach and navigate toxic relationships. Have you ever found yourself trapped in a relationship that drained your energy and distorted your sense of self? Comment 1, if you've been through this before. Comment 2, if you've only witnessed it happen to others. If you've ever experienced your perception being distorted, your emotional energy depleted, and your sense of sanity undermined by someone who appears to thrive on your disorientation, rest assured you're not imagining things. Carl Jung described this experience as the result of encountering a phenomenon he termed the shadow projection, a manifestation of a deeply injured and unresolved psychological state. Today, I will reveal a single powerful sentence from Jung that has the potential to halt a narcissist in their psychological tracks and evoke a lasting sense of fear and discomfort in them. But here's the important part. Once you internalize this psychological principle, you'll reach a point of no return. The spell of manipulation will be broken permanently. So ask yourself, are you truly prepared for that kind of liberation and clarity? Before we proceed, if this resonates with you and you're new to our content, consider subscribing to the channel. It's one of the best ways to support our mission and help us continue offering in-depth, valuable material. Carl Jung emphasized that narcissistic behavior is fundamentally not a reflection of you. Rather, it stems from their unconscious fear of confronting their own repressed and shadow aspects. He believed that narcissists function under what he called an inflated ego consciousness, a defensive psychological stance designed to conceal deep-rooted feelings of emptiness and unresolved shame. Narcissists often focus their manipulation on individuals who are empathetic and capable of self-reflection, as Jung explained, because these traits mirror qualities the narcissist has disowned or suppressed within their own psyche. Jung observed that narcissists are instinctively drawn to their psychological opposites, individuals who embody traits such as deep empathy, sincere introspection, and emotional richness, all qualities they have exiled to their unconscious shadow. This dynamic creates an intense, often destructive attraction that fuels the narcissist's internal conflict. Why does this happen? Because your presence reminds them of the emotional depth and authenticity they've abandoned, and that realization is profoundly frightening for them. Rather than confronting this painful truth, they deflect by projecting their internal turmoil onto you. However, Jung uncovered a startling psychological truth. The instant you become aware of this projection, the dynamic shifts. You gain complete psychological leverage. Stay engaged, because what comes next reveals how Jung's deep psychological insights bring to light the core fear that narcissists desperately try to hide. Carl Jung asserted that narcissists are controlled by what he referred to as a persona obsession, a compulsive need to uphold a deceptive facade no matter the emotional or relational cost. He outlined 3 primary psychological forces behind narcissistic behavior: the urge to control as a defense against confronting their shadow, the craving for constant validation to sustain an inflated self-image, and the use of confusion as a smokescreen to obscure their authentic self. According to Jung, control is their most critical survival tactic. They strive to dominate your perceptions, emotions, and even your understanding of reality, because your authenticity poses a serious threat to the integrity of their fabricated identity. In his examination of personality disorders, Carl Jung found that narcissists harbor a deep and persistent fear of being authentically perceived by others. This fear drives them to manipulate your sense of reality, not from a position of strength or confidence, but from a desperate effort to avoid vulnerability. Have you noticed how fear often hides beneath control and manipulation? Comment 1 if you've recognized this pattern in someone's behavior. Comment 2 if it's only become clear to you after reflecting on past experiences. Jung clarified that their constant craving for validation doesn't stem from genuine self-assurance. Instead, it's what he identified as ego inflation, a psychological mechanism compensating for a hidden and profound internal deflation. Their pursuit of praise isn't about joy or self-worth. It's a desperate attempt to avoid the psychological breakdown that would result from confronting their disowned shadow self. Compliments serve merely as momentary relief, like bandages on emotional wounds that never truly close or heal. One of Jung's most unsettling findings was how narcissists intentionally weaponize confusion in their relationships. He noticed that narcissists consciously generate what he labeled as psychological fog, a deliberate blurring of clarity and truth. By distorting the boundary between fact and fiction, they make their target doubt themselves, because confusion breeds compliance and control. Their goal is to undermine your confidence in your own judgment, since a clear and self-aware mind threatens their manipulative influence. Keep reading. Jung's answer to escaping this mental trap is profound and potentially transformative. Jung stated that the essential strategy for overcoming narcissistic control is through what he termed conscious withdrawal of projection. In essence, it means refusing to offer them the emotional fuel they so desperately seek. Jung described narcissists as emotional parasites relying heavily on what he called unconscious participation from their victims. This includes your reactive emotions, your efforts to explain yourself, and your longing for their understanding, each one providing them with psychological sustenance. Jung pointed out that arguing with a narcissist isn't a genuine or logical exchange of ideas. Instead, you're unknowingly nurturing their shadow self, empowering their hidden wounded psyche. Each emotional outburst, attempt to defend yourself, or display of uncertainty signals to them that their manipulative tactics are succeeding. This dynamic gives rise to what Jung referred to as unconscious participation mystique, a powerful psychological entanglement. Over time, you find yourself caught in the web of their false reality, losing sight of your own truth. However, Jung introduced a transformative idea that changes everything. The instant you reach a state of what Jung termed conscious detachment, the narcissist's influence over you begins to weaken significantly. This detachment isn't about emotional indifference. It's a deeper form of awareness Jung called individuated consciousness, a fully developed and self-possessed state of mind. In this state, you can recognize their behavior for what it is without being emotionally manipulated or overtaken by it. According to Jung, maintaining strong conscious detachment means refusing to engage in the emotional theatrics orchestrated by the narcissist. You become an impartial observer, recognizing their manipulative behaviors without letting those actions affect your internal balance. You see their emotional projections for what they are, yet you don't allow them to shape your identity or emotional reality. This emotional withdrawal pushes narcissists into a state of panic, as Jung noted, because their fragile ego relies on your unwitting involvement to remain inflated. Jung's most profound realization is this: narcissists cannot psychologically survive when faced with someone who has achieved emotional and cognitive independence. When you no longer need their approval, stop defending your position and give up the effort to get them to acknowledge your truth. You enter a state Jung described as psychologically unavailable, effectively cutting off their access to your emotional energy. But there's more. Jung uncovered a single sentence that can dramatically speed up your journey towards psychological freedom. Carl Jung found that a specific phrase has the power to dismantle the psychological entanglement he referred to as narcissistic participation mystique. This statement is uniquely effective because it does not confront the narcissist's ego, provoke defensive reactions, or provide material they can twist and use against you. Instead, it performs a psychological act that narcissists are incapable of coping with. It establishes a firm and impenetrable boundary that resists their efforts to control or distort it. The phrase is simple yet powerful: "I'm not available for this conversation." Jung stated that this phrase deeply unsettles narcissists because it withholds the one thing they depend on most: your unthinking emotional involvement in their distorted version of reality. He noted that narcissists thrive by drawing others into repetitive and unproductive emotional loops, what he termed circular psychological entanglement. These conversations are designed not to resolve anything, but to exhaust your emotional resources and distort your perception of reality. But when you calmly assert, "I'm not available for this conversation," you're taking a radical and empowering step. You're reclaiming your energy and ending your participation in their psychological control. Jung labeled this deliberate emotional disengagement as conscious non-participation and revealed that it is what narcissists fear above all else. Why is this so frightening for them? Because Jung recognized that narcissists rely on your emotional reactions to uphold their inflated, fragile ego structure. Without your engagement, they must confront the inner void, what Jung termed the shadow emptiness that they've spent their entire existence avoiding. Jung noted that this particular phrase is powerful precisely because it cannot be logically contested, emotionally manipulated, or twisted into something else. It's not an aggressive statement, so the narcissist can't portray themselves as the injured party. It also avoids explanation, which prevents them from derailing you with gaslighting or rhetorical manipulation. Ultimately, the phrase functions as a clear, calm boundary. Nothing more, nothing less. Boundaries can feel both liberating and intimidating at the same time. Comment 1 if setting firm boundaries has been empowering for you. Comment 2 if you still find it challenging to uphold them. Jung concluded that strong, healthy boundaries are the ultimate weakness of narcissistic behavior. They cannot manipulate what they cannot access. However, Jung issued a crucial warning. Initially, narcissists will likely escalate their tactics. Stay with this insight because their overreaction is actually confirmation that your boundary is having an impact. Jung accurately foresaw the pattern of what he termed shadow projection, intensification. a surge in manipulative behavior in response to your repeated use of this boundary. When narcissists feel their psychological grip slipping, they instinctively ramp up their efforts to control and confuse you. Expect them to hurl accusations, labeling you as detached, dismissive, or emotionally distant in a last-ditch effort to re-engage you. But Jung emphasized that this pushback is evidence that your firm stance is effectively disrupting their control system. He explained that your boundary disturbs their psychological equilibrium, the delicate illusion they need to uphold their false identity. By stepping out of their emotional games, you force them into ego deflation, anxiety, and intense fear that comes from confronting their true, wounded inner self. Jung found something extraordinary. By consistently holding your boundary, you initiate a process he called psychological individuation, the full emergence of your authentic self. Through this process, you begin to take back your inner strength and clarity. Each time you assert, "I'm not available for this conversation," in a composed manner, you reaffirm your emotional autonomy and self-ownership. Jung noted that over time, narcissists come to recognize that this particular boundary is unbreakable. They might attempt alternative forms of manipulation, but your persistent refusal to participate severs what Jung described as the projection hook, the mechanism through which they ensnare you into their warped reality. Jung asserted that this sentence carries far more weight than mere language. It is a bold affirmation of your psychological independence. By saying it, you're making a powerful statement. Your emotional energy is no longer accessible to their schemes, their chaos, or their draining behaviors. Jung explained that this deeply frightens narcissists as it compels them to face their most profound fear, not physical loss, but psychological abandonment. It's not necessarily your absence that unnerves them, but the loss of their ability to use you as a buffer against confronting their inner darkness. Jung's concluding insight could radically alter your understanding of how to navigate toxic dynamics. According to Jung, consistently upholding this boundary enables you to reach what he viewed as the pinnacle of psychological maturity, achieving individuation while under pressure from manipulation. You evolve into what Jung termed psychologically whole, a self-aware individual who remains intact, impervious to others' unconscious emotional projections. Jung emphasized that this transformation offers more than protection from a single toxic individual. It renders you resistant to narcissistic abuse in any form. You cultivate what Jung referred to as conscious recognition, the refined ability to detect projection, deceit, and psychological traps before they have a chance to influence you. Jung observed that those who develop and maintain such emotional clarity become the narcissist's worst fear, individuals who are completely inaccessible to manipulation. You transform into a person they can no longer exploit, disorient, or dominate emotionally. In doing so, you reclaim what Jung described as your authentic psychological authority, a grounded sense of inner sovereignty. Yet Jung's most transformative insight lies in this: the boundary-defining sentence alters not only how narcissists perceive you, but fundamentally reshapes how you perceive yourself. Each time you uphold your psychological limits, you reinforce what Jung called the conscious ego, your stable, self-defined identity that cannot be weakened or undermined by anyone else. Jung taught that genuine psychological liberation isn't achieved by altering others, but by removing yourself as a participant in their unconscious emotional narratives. When you fully embrace the practice of conscious non-involvement, you do more than avoid manipulation. You rise above it psychologically and emotionally. Jung believed this is the path to reclaiming personal power, setting firm boundaries, choosing your responses intentionally, and repeating this practice moment by moment. The narcissist's most destructive tool, manipulative drama, loses all effectiveness against someone who chooses not to engage. Jung's teachings reveal a liberating truth. Overcoming narcissism doesn't require winning, confronting, or defeating the narcissist. The only essential step is to remove yourself emotionally and mentally from their game, becoming someone they can no longer reach. And that is what instills lasting fear in them. Not your rage, but the serenity they can't disturb. Not your resistance or logic, but your deliberate, calm refusal to engage. Not your emotional responses, but your unwavering choice to not be drawn into their false psychological narrative. The instant this truth becomes part of your awareness, the battle is already over, and you've emerged victorious. Thank you for accompanying me on this deep dive into Jung's insights. If this message resonated with you, consider subscribing and sharing the content with someone else who might find healing or empowerment through it. This journey into Jung's wisdom raises an important question. How do you respond when faced with manipulation? Comment 1 if you've already embraced the power of calm disengagement. Comment 2 if you're just beginning to explore this path.